is also condemning the terror attack. And UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said there is no justification for the killing of civilians and hopes that those responsible will be brought to justice. The White House called the attack despicable and outrageous. Russian President Vladimir Putin called the attack a bloody crime. France, Greece, and Vietnam, as well as the European Union, are sending their condolences to the families and friends of the victims. They also expressed their hope that those behind the attack are brought to justice. This is the latest in a string of terrorist incidents in the region. Earlier, I spoke to Philip Potter from the University of Michigan and asked him about the increasing sophistication of these attacks.
I think the concern is that as we see the U.S. and NATO forces withdraw from Afghanistan, there's going to be a power vacuum in that area. And the worry that I and others have is that we're going to see militant organizations operating across these borders. These organizations have long sort of had strongholds in Pakistan. And within those regions, they've largely been concerned with combating NATO forces. So the worry hasn't been China explicitly, but what I'm worried about is the extent to which they may turn their attention to China once the fight against NATO is over.
This is almost a drip, drip, drip effect that we're seeing now. Just how serious is this?
I think at this given point in time, this is within the range of what might be acceptable to the Chinese authorities. It is, as you described it, a drip, drip, drip. The worry that people have is about escalation, right? We've seen an increasing number of attacks over time. The attacks appear to be becoming more sophisticated. The targets have been civilians recently as opposed to military forces or police forces. All of these things point in sort of the wrong direction. And so the worry is it's going to get worse.
Philip, we know that the U.S. and China have been at odds this week, but this looks like an area where they might be able to cooperate, since it seems like these are bad actors intent on harming both U.S. and Chinese citizens and U.S. and Chinese interests. Can you see an area where they might be able to collaborate on this?
I think there's some potential for overlap here, some potential for collaboration. There has been tension in this relationship over this particular issue, though. The Chinese authorities have taken some exception to the reluctance of the U.S. to call these acts terrorism. There's been a lot of back and forth on that and some hurt feelings. And so I think U.S. officials need to be very careful about Chinese sensibilities in this area. And I think the Chinese need to be careful about the extent to which they try to paint this as part of a global movement when that may be premature.
And Xinhua is reporting that President Xi Jinping and his Pakistani counterpart have agreed to strengthen cooperation in counterterrorism efforts. Is that going to make much of a dent, do you think?
So this is one of the more interesting components of the whole affair. We had a pretty significant Pakistani strike on militant forces operating in Waziristan, and these were explicitly named as being Uyghur forces associated with the Eastern Turkestan Islamic movement, which is what the Chinese refer to as sort of the main Uyghur separatist organization responsible for some of these terrorist attacks. What I think that points to is growing cooperation in this domain between Pakistan and China. So there is apparently increasing cooperation now, and to the extent that that can continue, I think that's probably a good thing for regional stability.
Philip, thanks so much for your observations. Great talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, thank you.